from the TV30 studio, here's Jim Schneider.
Well, good evening. Welcome to inFocus. We're so glad you joined us tonight. This happens to be our final program of the season. We are looking forward to certainly being in summer recess, but being back again, Lord willing, next September to inform you on other critical issues that are impacting us in our state, but tonight being our final broadcast. We would, as we mentioned last week, just ask for your continued prayers for Mr. Marv Munyon. Marv suffered a stroke on May the 11th, and speaking with his wife this morning, they're asking specific prayer for his speech-related issues, swallowing difficulties, and also for strengthening. Remember those three S's, speech, swallowing, and just for strength. I know that would be greatly appreciated. Marv was actually my very first inFocus interview ever in 1996. And became a regular ghost, a guest ghost as well, but a guest here to the program, and he was engaged with the formation of the Wisconsin Family Institute, and it used to be Christian Research Institute, then Wisconsin Family Research Institute, then Wisconsin Family Council, and talking about legislative issues. And really, tonight is no exception. We're going to continue in that vein this evening as we talk about public policy issues. We've been warned about the congressional maps would be redrawn if a liberal candidate was elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and friends, we're going to give you an update what's going on there. Also, we find that there's a proposed constitutional amendment that would actually give places of worship the authority to stay open even in times of a state emergency. We'll give you an update on this. And then also we have Republicans who are leading the charge to give pharmacists the authority to prescribe and dispense contraceptives. So we're going to talk about that and many other issues. First, let's welcome to our studios Jelaine Appling with us tonight. Good to have you back, Jelaine, President Emeritus of Wisconsin Family Council.
Good to be here. By the way, thank you for mentioning Marv Munyon and the role he played in our organization.
You two worked together many years,
we did.
So that goes back a long time
absolutely.
as well. Also, Sam Krebs with us here tonight, Legislative Director for Wisconsin Family Action. Good to have you back,
Evening,
Sam.
Jim. Good to see you.
Great. So we just recently passed Mother's Day, and my mind goes back to Mother's Day of just a few years ago, and on that afternoon, earlier in the afternoon, I received a contact communication about a firebomb that had gone off at Wisconsin Family Action. And Jelaine, you're very much involved. You're engaged in celebrating Mother's Day, even at your church, and preparation and everything for that, and got word about the firebombing at your clinic. What had happened, we understand, is we see some of the pictures there, but the word got leaked regarding the forthcoming Supreme Court decision, the Dobbs case. So there was that warning that was going out to pro-life agencies. Yours became the first in the nation to be firebombed, and also they put up the threat: if abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. We also saw some symbols that were put on there, and we understand a group known as Jane's Revenge involved in all this. But give us your thoughts. Take us back those 3 years. And we understand the individual who perpetrated this evil had been apprehended?
Yeah, one of them. They know there was more than one. They have DNA samples from 3.
Okay.
So one's a partial set of DNA and the other's a full set. But believe it or not, I always thought everybody's DNA in the whole world was out there, but it's not. So one set of DNA they haven't yet been able to match. So we are considered still an open case.
Okay.
You know, Jim, I don't think we'll ever again, if you're a team member like Sam is, a new team member in our organization, or if you've been there a long time like I have, we'll ever think about Mother's Day in the same way.
Right.
Because it was pretty horrific to realize on that phone call that I received early in the morning while I was at church getting ready for a Mother's Day brunch, to hear that we'd been firebombed, and to make that mad dash into Madison to walk into the building, and the acrid smell all the way down the hall. We're a long ways from the opening, and it was just, it was very obvious when I walked in. The picture that the viewers are looking at right now is, I kind of jokingly say it's the picture that's been seen around the world.
Right.
Because every time this issue comes up, that picture is shown, because it's so obvious that something happened there. Fortunately, it's so early in the morning on that Mother's Day, nobody was in the building. To be honest with you, they weren't very good at making Molotov cocktails. So the first one didn't work. So they broke the window, threw the second one in, And that didn't work as well as they wanted it to, so they lit a fire on books that I had on the windowsill there. And 15, 20 minutes after that, a car went by going out to the airport there and saw the flames and the smoke coming out of our window and called fire department. So, I think the first thing that you think of when you do that is, wow, why us? But as soon as I heard the report, I knew it was about the abortion issue because of the proximity to the leaked Dobbs decision. And of course, when we drove up and we saw the handwriting, literally the handwriting on the wall. By the way, that threat, if abortion starts, that's still a live threat, as far as I know, because we have at least one other perpetrator, that's not been detained at all. So, it was a little over a year ago, April, they got the one guy and he's been in jail. They sentenced him to 7.5 years, actually out of a possible 15. Actually out of possible 25.
He was trying to leave the country?
He was trying to leave the country. Yeah, they apprehended him, the FBI apprehended him with a one-way ticket at the Boston International Airport headed to, it was like Guatemala or something like that. And I did have the occasion to talk to the FBI. I said, I've seen a lot of TV, those kinds of things. And he said, it was all of that and more.
Yeah.
So, the guy never saw him coming, apparently. I was in the courtroom when the initial hearing took place when he pled guilty. And then I was not there during the sentencing hearing. I had to go in remotely. But he was so arrogant, so arrogant. There is no remorse for what he did. And you know what amazes me to this day, Jim, is that he never ratted on anybody, in spite of much pressure that was brought to bear. Because we really thought, that he would, and we'd find out who the other two are. But praise God, nobody was in the building. It was so early, nobody was hurt. We were able to repair the damage. It took a little bit of reshuffling to get things, get our legs under us again, because I spent the entire next week and more doing just media. That's all I had time to do. So, it caused a lot of changes for us, made us more alert, more aware. But, I said at the very beginning, what man intends for evil, God will very often turn to good, and that's what happened.
Yeah, indeed. Sam, you're now with Wisconsin Family Action. The organization that is pro-marriage, pro-family, pro-children, pro-life. When did you first learn about this having taken place?
Yeah, Jim, I was not with Wisconsin Family Action or Council at that time, but I do remember the story broke pretty much. Was shocking, I think, to say the least. You don't expect that in your network, in your relationships, to have a friend or at that time be firebombed. And so I think that was shocking, to say the moment. But even now being an employee of Wisconsin Family Action and working there, it informs my actions. When I leave work every night, I make sure I take everything with me that I think is valuable to me, because I might come back and that might not be there. So it doesn't even now inform my actions, how I behave.
Yeah, and cognizant of your surroundings as you do leave as well. Well, as Jelaine mentioned, the threats continued on, and numerous other pro-life agencies and pro-lifers targeted through this time as well, and many times that same threat would appear before or on the walls or sprawled, or even the phone calls, and you had many phone call threats that came through at the same time. But friends, even up to this very weekend, and we've got another photo to take place because there has been another bombing taking place in order to try and destroy life. This is taking us now to the scene in California, near the Palm Springs, California area. This past Saturday, another clinic bombed. At this time, it was a fertility clinic, one by an individual called a population control activist. Reports are that he was an anti-baby philosophy. He believed it was unethical to bring new life into the world without consent. He expressed anger even over his own existence. And matter of fact, looking at an article here from Pro-Life News, lifenews.com, he criticized those who chose to have children, calling the decision stupid, and very much believed nobody got my permission for me to be born. You need to somehow obtain the consent of a child before the child is born. It's just outrageous.
Well, it is outrageous. As I thought about this, Jim, first of all, the declaration. IVF, our organization we don't believe IVF is handled well at all. Frankly, we believe that we probably need legislation that says if you create an embryo for IVF purposes, every embryo that's created should be implanted, because then we don't create this excess. But this young man is sorely wrong. First of all, let's make it very clear. We don't have a population issue.
Right.
If anything, well, I should say it differently. We have a population issue, but it's not an excess. It's a diminishing population because we have such a low birth rate here in Wisconsin. But it's not just here; it's all over the country now and around the world. And so this young man is, number one, poorly informed, and just completely devoid of any understanding that God is the author of life, and every life has inherent value and worth, because that life is an image bearer of our Creator God.
Yeah.
And so bringing new life into this world is not stupid. It's God's plan. Because he told Adam and Eve, and he reiterated it, did he not, to Noah, be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
And he sees us as his crowning creative act, a little lower than the angels. So this is just sad news all the way around. Because those babies that are created through, those embryos that are created as little babies through the IVF process, many of them won't survive, unfortunately, but some will be adopted. And so for him to destroy all those embryos,
it was his attempt.
Yeah.
But we understand that none were destroyed in his firebomb attack, so very good in that regard. Okay, Sam, let's talk about this word that's going out about the matter of, we were told that if we just elect a liberal justice to the Supreme Court, that congressional maps would be under fire. And are they?
Jim, we talked about this, it was back in January maybe. We said this is on the table when we come to elections, that the congressional maps would be a target by liberal members of the court. And sure enough, we have a lawsuit that was filed very recently to overturn the current congressional maps that are in place in Wisconsin. That this come to bear is elections have consequences, and this is one of the consequences. They brought a court case forward to overturn congressional maps in Wisconsin.
And friends, that is taking place right now, and I understand that the Supreme Court has given till May 29th, Wisconsin Elections Commission, to actually respond to this, Jelaine.
Well, they have, and frankly, in my understanding, and Sam might know more about this than I do at this point because he follows those things really closely, but it's my understanding that this court's got itself in a bind, because just a few years ago, they approved these maps. I think it was 2022, they approved these maps. And now they're going to say all of a sudden, for no reason at all, they're wrong and they need to be changed. So, but I also know that they're also giving, and their wording is weird. It says that anyone else who wants to weigh in on this case has a deadline also. I think they must be looking for new interveners or new people who are interested as stakeholders in this. But frankly, as I said, Sam can add to that, but I don't understand how they find room to change these maps.
And Sam, at the same time, there is pressure, have a comment on this, but there is pressure to get all this done because they're talking about 2026, next year's election. Yeah,
and I mean, it could be even sooner if they call a special election for some of these things too. But I think Julian's right that they kind of, the liberals have put themselves in the bind because we go back to 2011, which this seems like ages ago now. But these are congressional maps that were written in 2011, which is what our current maps are based on, were written in a bipartisan manner. They were written with input from both sides. So that's one strike against you. As Julian mentioned, this court already, second strike is Governor Evers now wrote the maps in 2020. These are the maps that he wrote. So it was written by a Democrat governor. Previously, the ones that were the foundation for this were written in a bipartisan manner. So now you're saying, what's the reason for them throwing them out? And they're like, well, there are too many voters in Dane County. There are too many voters in Milwaukee County. Well, if you start breaking up Dane County and Milwaukee County, there's a word for that. It's called gerrymandering. So they're essentially asking the court to, on their benefit, gerrymander the maps, not so that the maps are more fair, but so that the Democrats have a chance to win more seats. And that's blind, it's a bald partisan move. And we'll hope that the Liberal members maybe have some decency left in them to say, we're not going to go along with this charade.
Let me share a quote here. This is reported on wispolitics.com, and this is Conservative Justice Rebecca Bradley ripped the court's decision, noting Justice-elect Susan Crawford participated in a donor call ahead of her April victory that billed her race as a chance to flip the 2 GOP-held House seats in Wisconsin. She also pointed to Justice Janet Protasewicz's 2023 campaign, in which she railed against rigged legislative maps. She added, entertaining these claims makes a mockery of our justice system, degrades this court as an institution, and perpetrates the public's perception that justice is for sale in Wisconsin.
And Justice Bradley, she's very fiery and used some very fiery language there. But you know, the Supreme Court didn't have to take this case. They have discretion of which cases they take up. They're going to take this on an original action, kind of a technical term, but they could have made it go through the lower courts first. By them prioritizing it does kind of signal where their mind is heading at already. It's signaling kind of a predetermined effect. Once again, we're hoping for a different outcome, but the Liberal Supreme Court has a majority at this moment.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this, the Supreme Court refused to take up a similar lawsuit during their last session on this very issue.
Okay.
So I think if they do this, I think the bottom line is they're showing they're very political. They're taking
very strong bias, especially when you see
right.
we need to get this for the 2026 elections, and we do have another census just 4 years down the road, don't we? I mean, the 2030 census that would affect the congressional districts after that, Sam.
You're correct. Every 10 years we have the census, and maps get redrawn to reapportion kind of if population changes.
Right.
If different parts of the state have more population versus 10 years ago. So yeah, it will have a little bit of whiplash effect if they do that just now.
Yeah. And again, perhaps another redraw after the 2030 census as well. So that issue going there. Also, speaking of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, here's another headline that came out recently. Wisconsin Supreme Court seeks investigation after abortion draft order leaks. And here's another one that came out from the Spectrum News. Investigators don't know who leaked the Wisconsin Supreme Court draft abortion order. This leak evidently from about a year ago. I understand that they were going to be taking an abortion case, Sam?
That's correct. So it's actually a case that's currently still before the Supreme Court deciding whether 940.04 is good law or not law. So the Supreme Court was working on this, and so an order was leaked, like you said, a year ago. And so they did a full, long investigation of this, and they came up and said, we don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So similar to the Dobbs situation where there was a leak, someone in Wisconsin who worked either in the office or was familiar with what was going on leaked the details of that case. Sadly, it kind of breached the trust of, once again, you're talking about the Supreme Court and the lack of trust, making these bold partisan moves and making no bones about what their intent about certain things, and now you have leaks coming out of it. Your trust in the institution of the court gets diminished. So we're hopeful. Right at this point, the person who leaked it is not brought to justice, but justice is long, so we'll see how long it takes for them to.
Meanwhile, we
known.
spent close to $150,000 or so in this, Julian.
Well, don't you find it interesting that the place that it was leaked to is Wisconsin Watch, which is not a conservative media outlet. They've got strong liberal ties there, and so that makes you very suspicious. But no, I think everybody knows it pays any attention. Our Supreme Court is out of control. The new Susan Crawford will be seated August 1st, replacing Justice Ann Welsh Bradley, who right now is acting as the Chief Justice for 2 months. And then she'll be replaced by Karofsky, Justice Karofsky.
She will be the Chief Justice then?
Yeah, well, they did a number. Remember a few years ago we said, okay, you can't just be the longest serving justice to be the Chief Justice. So they elect them from themselves for 2-year terms. And this court, right after the election, did a real weird thing, elected Ann Welsh Bradley for 2 months as Chief Justice so she could have it before she retires. And then for the full 2-year term, they'll roll in Jill Karofsky. So they're game players. They're playing with everything they can.
I guess you can retire with the title then, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Sam, both of you actually have been watching this budget process here rather closely, and we'll have you both comment on this, but we understand that things are kind of at a stalling point right now with the Speaker kind of saying, hey, we need to get things straight on a tax decrease in order to advance a budget. So let's share what we know here.
Yeah, so some recent action on the budget. So I think it was back in April, the Joint Finance Committee held listening sessions around the state. So they traveled all four corners of Wisconsin, kind of spent the entire day at a certain location, listening to people testifying on what was important to them in the budget, come back, and now they take up Evers' budget, which he had proposed, and this is pretty standard policy. They stripped everything that Evers proposed out of the budget. And so under split government, Republicans are, the legislature is the budget writing house. And so they stripped out all the policy items that Governor Evers proposed, and they're starting from pretty much from scratch. So they'll now work to build their own budget over the next month to build their own version. And your Hum's right, the negotiations have stalled out on a tax cut. Republican leaders, I think, met with Governor Evers once, and they're like, let's continue these negotiations. And Governor Evers said, I'm not meeting with you anymore. And so I think it's hard to build trust if you're not able to see someone face to face, talk to them. I think that's what maybe the Republican leaders were trying to, I'm just guessing, but maybe they're trying to build some trust there of saying we can meet in person, we can talk in person, maybe negotiate, hammer this out. And they've decided that they don't want to meet in person.
Republicans want to put the tax dollars back into the taxpayers' pockets. The governor doesn't want to do that, Jolene.
Well, no, he doesn't. And we just got word towards the end of last week that revenue is going to probably be less than we thought it was going into the last half of 2025. Mm-hmm. So Republican leadership is saying, hey, we need to tighten our belt and budget very carefully. We still have a surplus that Governor Evers really believes is his, and that he wants to be able to use to fund more for public education, more welfare and things like that. He has, in my opinion, he has no intention of giving us a true tax cut.
Yeah.
Because what it looked like when he gave his budget speech, he tried to make it sound like he was going to give us a tax cut. But when you looked at the details, it didn't end up being a tax cut for middle class. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't think they're going to do that. Unfortunately, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, because you worked on the inside a long time, but even under Republican leadership, budgets tend to go up on the expense side every cycle.
Correct.
So you've got to balance that. If you want to have an increase on your expense side, you've got to make sure you've got the money coming in on the revenue side before you take care of those tax cuts.
And on top of that, not only do we have that budget going on, but there's also the money left over from the COVID money, to the tune of $170 million, and they're calling it here from the center square, Evers hoarding illegal $170 million slush fund. Evidently at the money that we got from the federal government, there's lots of interest money that has come in for this, and the governor's kind of keeping that in his pocket along with the budget excess.
Yeah, Jim, it's kind of a technical thing because Wisconsin received billions of dollars in accounts from the federal government to address the coronavirus pandemic and do all sorts of things with that. In 2023, the Legislative Audit Bureau was conducting an audit of that coronavirus money, making sure it's going where it's supposed to, which a lot of times it didn't. But in the course of that, they realized that the money that's sitting in that bank account was earning interest. Day after day, earning billions of dollars, earns a lot of interest, $171 million at this point. And the governor's office was treating that money as federal money. Well, the legislature says, well, hold up now. That's not federal money, that's interest on the federal money. That belongs, and state law says that any money that's specified, that is not specified purpose, belongs in the general treasury, which is the authority of the legislature. And so there's this little battle going on there, but I think it's really evident of the issues between the executive and legislative branch and the power imbalance there. Mm-hmm. Because really this money should be, once again, the people should have input on how that money is spent, and it should belong in the general treasury for the legislature to decide how it's spent. So there's the bill out there to right that wrong.
So what's the path forward right now in the budget?
Path forward on the budget right now is, Joey mentioned the revenue, so it's just recently came in, so that's gone down. I've heard costs continue, so that's how much money, just to have, not even to increase any money, but just the money to keep things as they were. Billions of dollars increase, over $1 billion just for a program called Medicaid. And so they're going to have the tough time figuring out how we're going to tighten our budget, but also at the same time meet the services that people are expecting, while also delivering a tax cut. That's a very difficult line to walk. So they're going to be figuring out next month. They're going to be meeting both the Assembly Republicans, Senate Republicans, hashing out what are the details here. What can we give? What can we take? How are we going to figure this out. So they'll be in negotiations for about the next month.
Isn't June 30th the deadline for that?
It is.
That's an arbitrary deadline.
Arbitrary deadline. And fun, I mean, we just continue to function on the old budget otherwise, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, not only is it Wisconsin focusing on a budget, but it's also the federal government right now too. And there is a lot of back and forth going on. It just passed a key hurdle in the House this past week. It's got to go to the U.S. Senate. But one of the big things that they're debating right now, and here's an article pertaining to the funding of Planned Parenthood. And this is a number of lawmakers in Wisconsin that are contacting the delegation representing Wisconsin, calling on members of Congress to oppose any effort to defund Planned Parenthood. And this just came, and we'll be talking about this more on Radio Crosstalk this week, but Planned Parenthood committed 402,230 abortions and received $792.2 million in taxpayer funding in 2024. Not only is this the record number of abortions, I mean, it was over the previous year, but also this is record funding for Planned Parenthood with our tax dollars as well. Your response, Jelaine?
Well, look, Planned Parenthood wants to say that they're all about women's health care, that they do all kinds of things to help women and necessary procedures and so forth. But we know the truth is they make their money, the cash cow, and I hate to use it that way, but that's what it is. Abortion is their main money-making stream. And so, and who's their likely person? It's a lower-income woman. That's why they locate in inner cities primarily. So they're kind of preying on these women. It is past time to truly defund, not play on the margins.
Right.
It's time to go full throat and defund Planned Parenthood. Not only are they the nation's largest abortion provider with these insane numbers, okay, and to make sure people know, as our viewers, Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin is part of that affiliate, okay, nationally. But they are now the second largest provider of hormones, cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, and all of that for people who are confused about their gender, many of whom I am sure are teenagers. So all of this is part of that conglomerate of things that they're doing. But one thing they're not doing is providing true health care. And let's really quickly mention, if Planned Parenthood gets defunded at the federal level, that money just doesn't disappear into the atmosphere in a vapor. It's redirected. It's redirected to federally qualified health centers. Do you know, Jim, there are 158 federally qualified health centers in Wisconsin and 21 Planned Parenthood facilities.
Aye.
Now, who has more access? Well, by far, these federally qualified health centers.
Right.
And that's, a lot of people, Planned Parenthood's making it sound like that money's going to be gone, the women are going to be desperate, they won't have health care. They'll have more access to health care, not less.
Friends, that battle goes on in Washington, D.C., and you can be in touch with your member of Congress, and they will soon be voting in the Congress as a whole. The senators will also be voting on this, and to reach out to them to let your views be heard. Keep in mind the phone number to Washington, D.C. is 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121 to have your views expressed to your congressman in that regard. We're going to get looking at home, some legislation going on as well. Some of that gaining some traction. I have before me here Assembly Joint Resolution 10. This would be a proposed constitutional amendment that would allow us, the people of the state, to gather in places of worship during a time of emergency. Sam, I see this is second consideration.
Yes, Jim. So essentially what that means is this is a constitutional amendment that's being proposed in the legislature. So every constitutional amendment that's being proposed has to go through two successive legislatures. So it was passed previously in 2023, and it's up for a second consideration in 2025. If the legislature passes this in both houses, it skips the governor, does not go to the governor, it goes straight to the people on the ballot. We've seen a lot of constitutional amendments. And so this is one tool that legislators have used to take important measures to the people on this. This is one that we have been engaging on very regularly throughout the process on, and we're very supportive of, mainly because churches should have the right to be open regardless of circumstance. And so we saw in 2020 that wasn't necessarily the case. We saw in many different areas, and there was a public hearing recently on the resolution, and we had pastors come and testify about how they were intimidated, how the force of government was used to imply that if they met, that they might be fined, that they might be shut down. And so we think the Constitution is very clear that the right to worship should not be infringed. That's very explicitly clear. But this additional language will help people understand that maybe who don't see that as being very clear to be, no, that is the case. You are not allowed to infringe on rights regardless of what the circumstances are, whether it's a health emergency or other state emergency.
Jelaine, very troubling to see how the church is shut down during that time of COVID.
It was. Jim, look, I remember on Maundy Thursday of 2020, I think it was 2020, that our phones went ballistic, my personal cell phone, our office phones, my text message and email. We were getting calls from pastors all over the state saying, hey, the local law enforcement is telling me if we have a Good Friday service in our parking lot or an Easter service in our parking lot, that they're going to fine our people up to $500 a piece. And so they were calling us, and I'm like, we got to get some help. So I called our attorneys that are constitutional experts. And quite honestly, between Wisconsin Family Action and Council and Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, we got the governor to clarify that local law enforcement couldn't do that. But yeah, look, they changed how we did communion. They changed whether we could use hymn books. They changed how far apart we had to sit. Every other pew, whatever. And that's way too far for government to go.
Right.
It's a complete overreach.
Well, friends, again, this is making movement. Where is this at in the legislative process?
Right, so it had a public hearing in the Assembly, so that is almost ready to be voted on by Assembly. It needs a public hearing yet in the Senate. Right now, they're aiming for, if it does pass both houses, it would be on your ballot sometime either in spring of 2026 or in fall of 2026.
Okay, so can expect that to be happening, and I'm guessing the will of the present makeup of the Assembly and Senate is to move this forward.
I think we have a good shot, Jim.
Yeah, very good. Okay, there is something else we want to bring to the attention of our viewers here tonight. And by the way, before we leave that topic, this coming Friday evening at 8 o'clock Central Time, right here on TV 30, we are releasing a video documentary called The Essential Church, dealing with the Grace Community Church out of California and churches out of Canada, and how they were under threat by their government to be shut down, heavily fined if you meet. And you're going to see the process they work through. How do we do this when we're to obey those authorities that are over us? How do we reconcile that with the teachings of Scripture, where Scripture tells we have to obey God rather than men? So you can watch that on TV 30 this coming Friday evening, 8 o'clock, from 8 till 10 p.m. Here on this station, and I'm sure you'll find that to be very informative in that regard. We've been watching as well some legislation that's been going through, and many are just baffled that this is Republican legislation that's really been advancing. Assembly Bill number 43 that would give pharmacists the ability to prescribe contraceptives and then dispense them. Give us a word on this, Sam.
Yeah, so I think you've summed it up pretty well, Jim, but I think we're disappointed in the Assembly that they're making this a priority rather than looking at how they can best support marriage and family. I think that's a really big need that we have in society. How does government, instead of getting in the way of families, help and assist them? And so we'd much rather that they put their effort and their focus on things that are supportive of families, not judgmental towards them.
Right. Jelaine, your comments on this legislation?
Well, this isn't the first rodeo in this bill. This is like the fourth or fifth time that Republicans have introduced it, both the Senate and the Assembly. Every time it's passed in the Assembly, it passed just last week in the Assembly on a crazy vote of, what was it, 87 to 10. The only people voting against it were 10 Republicans. So now it's going to go in the Senate. In the past sessions, Jim, this bill has died in the Senate. Frankly, I don't have a lot of confidence that this bill will die in the Senate this time. I think new leadership, different priorities, different approaches, and things like that, we may see it go through. Look, I think it's a dangerous bill. I think it sends a wrong message to people. And by the way, there's a couple things, just real quickly I mentioned. They never mentioned the word woman in here. Well, men don't take these kind of contraceptive drugs and devices.
You're talking hormonal contraception.
Yeah, and so they're just given over to the quote woke movement,
right.
And some of it. But there's a lot of things. The only thing the woman has to do to get the pill or the prescription is submit to a blood pressure screen and answer questions on a self-administered medical questionnaire. So there's a lot of problems with this bill.
Missing a whole lot of health history there, perhaps. And I just want to point out one other thing as I opened this up here, and they just mentioned about the matter that it requires pharmacists who prescribe the hormonal contraceptive as provided in the bill to have, in effect, malpractice liability insurance coverage. In other words, make sure you're covered if you're going to do this.
You know who got that in there?
Who's that?
Us. Because I sat through hearing after hearing and said, where's the liability? Who's liable for this? And a very now influential state legislator looked at me and she said, oh, Ms. Appling, you know we pass bills all the time in this body that we don't know who's liable. I suggested at the time that perhaps they would want to reconsider that.
Right.
So,
Friends, you can reach out to your legislators, and this time it would be the senators, right, Sam? Because the Assembly has already passed it. And that's 800, the legislative hotline, 800-362-9472. That's 800-362-9472. Also, we're seeing some movement on legislation here, Assembly Bill number 5, which is relating to requiring school boards to make textbooks, curricula, and instructional materials available for instruction by school district residents. We understand that this recently has gone through some movement as well.
Correct. So I believe it's passed the Assembly, and the Senate is ready to take it up if they're willing. And really, Jim, this is a common sense issue. It shouldn't be a secret what our kids are being taught or shown in the classroom. That should be well known both for parents, but also for the community abroad. If your tax dollars are supporting a school in your area, which they are through your property taxes, then you have a right to know what they're being taught and if that abides with what your community standards are. So I don't think it's really all that much of a divisive issue when you take it on its face. Now, the opposition will make it political, but they have a reason for that. They don't want things that they're advancing an agenda on to be rooted out. They want to keep those hidden from public view, and so the less you know, the better for them. And so, sadly, I think it becomes a political issue and divisive, but on its face, it's really a common sense issue.
Friends, tonight you're watching inFocus. We've got a few more things we'll get through, and then we'll be opening up phone lines to give you opportunity to call in with a question, make comment on these issues of discussion. Jelaine Appling with us tonight, President Emeritus of Wisconsin Family Council, and also Sam Krebs, who is the Legislative Director for Wisconsin Family Action. I bring this bill forward to us here as well tonight because this is legislation that just introduced May the 2nd. May not even have mentioned this to you or not, I don't know. But it relates to the age at which an infant is covered under the Safe Haven law. And I bring it forth tonight because this changes it. Right now, they can safely place a newborn child up to 72 hours. I understand, Jelaine, into a drop box, so to speak, at a fire department. But this would expand that period of time.
Yeah, look, I love the Safe Haven law. Our Safe Haven law is really quite old. It's probably 15, 20 years old now. The baby drop box is new, just a couple of years old. There's only like 5 of them in the state. 72 hours has been the standard ever since we put the Safe Haven law into effect. I don't know, 30 days. I think I know when I look at the authors of this bill and the supporters of it, I think they're well intentioned on this. I hope they're right. And I hope it does save more babies. I have some questions about it, but I think their intention is good, and maybe we'll see more of them go that way. I suspect there's going to be a lot of input on this bill.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too. So I was doing some research actually on this recently, and so the Safe Haven law went into effect back in 2001. So it's a little over 2 decades old right now. There's a lot of discussion about it. It was very carefully crafted with a lot of input from many different sides, parental rights groups and tribes and pro-life groups. So there's a lot of input and thought into how do we help mothers who are facing crisis pregnancies and find some alternative pathways. So, the pro-life movement is all about finding those alternative pathways before birth. The pregnancy crisis resource centers are very helpful with that. But even after birth, how do you find help in that way? And so the Safe Haven law was born out of a situation where babies were being left in fields. They were being left in dumpsters and in toilets. And they wanted to find an alternative that way a mother could give up their baby anonymously without fear of repercussion. And so looking at other states, when they enacted these, the average is around 30 days. Wisconsin is actually an outlier where we limited it to only 3 days for that law to be effective. And so I think the authors are probably looking at this and saying, if we want to bring up our standards to the rest of the nation, the average is about 30 days. Some states go even up to a full year where you can give a child under safe haven laws. So I think their intent is to provide women who are in crisis a way to give up their baby and still have them be safe and taken care of. And so we do support that effort to take care of those babies.
I do bring this up because there's a public hearing coming up very soon on this matter, and for people to weigh in on it, the public hearing taking place Wednesday, the 21st, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and 10:01. But there'll be the opportunity for the public to weigh in. And
I was just going to point out the baby drop box. The value of that is there's complete anonymity. With the original safe haven law, which, like Sam pointed out, we worked on 24 years ago, you still have to see someone. With the baby drop box, you just put the baby and the alarms go off, then somebody comes and gets it. So.
Okay, very good. There's also, just brought before us here tonight, Assembly Bill 33, representing depicting nudity and providing a penalty. We understand there's been some movement on that, I understand?
Yeah, and so some legislators are really making a priority to have the law catch up to how technology is being used in explicit ways. You think about how IAI can be used nowadays. This is one of those options to add enhanced penalties to people who are using explicit content in a malicious way. Another one that I want to bring up too is a bill by Representative Snyder and Senator James, who they're adding sexual extortion as a crime. That ties into one of the things that we've been talking about a few times on this program is our age verification for pornography. And pornography is often a gateway to these sexual extortion crimes. There's some very sad cases of individuals taking their lives because they've been blackmailed, essentially. I was talking to someone who says that it's not kind of a long, drawn-out process usually. It's usually very instantaneous. They're blackmailed and they think that their life is over, and so they literally commit suicide because of these extortion schemes. And so I think the legislature, thankfully, is making a priority to have some of these laws catch up to the tactics that people are using against the innocent.
Any of these, friends, again, you can call the legislative hotline at 800-362-9472. I've got some more bills we'll be talking about here, friends, but I also want to open the phone lines, give you opportunity of already some of the things we have talked about legislatively going on. If you have a question pertaining to them, a comment pertaining to it as well, pick up your phone, give us a call here tonight. Our line is open, 414-935-3030. That's 414-935-3030. You may also reach us at 800-733-8830. 1-800-733-8830. A number of matters that are happening so quickly. And if you'd like to weigh in on them here this evening, maybe you've got a question about something that we've already talked about here tonight, pick up your phone, give us a call, 414-935-3030, 800-733-8830. 8830, and we'll seek to keep these numbers up on the screen for a reminder for you to give us a phone call. I see also that there is been movement on Assembly Bill 248 regarding vacancies in appointed state offices. I should say it was just introduced on May the 8th, and that's something that would allow for some of the shenanigans going on now to no longer happen. Jelaine, your comment on this?
Well, I think this is an appropriate bill personally. That, I think the main culprit is the Wisconsin Elections Commission. When there was a term ended and the person refused to go because there wasn't a new appointment yet, or there wasn't somebody ready to go, and that person just remained in the office in perpetuity. Basically.
Who's to make this appointment? Who makes this appointment?
Well, it's as I recall, the Wisconsin Elections Commission, wasn't that a number of people that could appoint different? The governor could appoint, the legislature, assembly majority could appoint, the minority party could appoint. So it's a conglomeration of people representing all the interests.
Okay.
But so I don't know who would have appointed that particular seat. I really don't.
That's a question.
Yeah, that's a good question. But this bill seems to me to be a reasonable approach to clarify. Mm-hmm. It clarifies. Once a term ends,
you're done.
You're done. And that seat remains vacant if nobody's ready to go. But you don't just stay there forever or until somebody finally says, oh, well, we're going to reappoint someone. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and Jim, this bill kind of cuts both ways, because if you think about previously, when Governor Evers was first elected, there was a situation with a gentleman called Fred Prane. he sat on the DNR board. His term ended, and so Governor Evers appointed someone. The Senate has the power of confirmation. They did not act on the confirmation of the person that Governor Evers appointed. So Fred Prane stayed in his seat because he was not forced out. There's a semi-similar situation with Megan Wolf, who heads up the Wisconsin Elections Commission as administrator. And so in one situation, it benefited Republicans, and another situation benefited Democrats. And so it kind of cuts both ways. This bill would eliminate those scenarios happening. So the Republicans are proposing this now. Democrats are rejecting because it doesn't advantage them right now. I would say if you have a new governor someday, you might see the same exact bill being proposed by Democrat and being opposed by Republicans.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Let's go to a couple of phone lines here. We've got, Chris calling from New Berlin. Hi, Chris, you're on the air.
Oh, thank you. Say, I'd like to just ask your guests, Jelaine and Sam, if they'd be willing to throw their hats in the ring and run for governor and lieutenant governor. They'd get a lot of votes.
Thank you for that. I don't know, either of you are wanting to go down that path.
I have a very clear answer, no. But thank you for the vote of confidence.
Yeah.
God bless all of you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call here. Let's see. Let's go to Jim from South Milwaukee. Hi, Jim. You're on the air.
Thank you. Well, Jelaine, first of all, it's good to see you again.
Oh, thank you, Jim.
And what I'm calling about is you just talked about the dropping babies off at hospitals or whatever. Yeah, there's an organization called Safe Haven Baby Boxes, and the leader of that is a Monica Kelsey. And her phone number is 888-742-2133. She might be able to shed some light for you folks that are interested in this as to how to pursue this further.
Okay. Thank you, Jim, for that. And you're familiar with the organization?
familiar with them. Actually was reading, once again, the representative who authored the baby box bill, worked very closely with them, Representative Ellen Shute. She's no longer in the legislature, but she had authored that baby box bill specifically because of a situation that happened in Whitewater where a baby was left out in a field and left there to die. And that was in her district. And so she responded by writing a bill that would provide safe haven baby boxes covered under the safe haven law. I believe there's been, like Jillian mentioned, a few installed. We'd hope to see more of them because it, once again, it provides that outlet for women in crisis who want to give up their babies but maybe aren't quite sure how to.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we should add there is that the ones that have been installed in Wisconsin thus far have been done so by private funding. See, it can be a hospital or a fire station where there's EMT services or a hospital, okay? So what happens is those entities are probably not going to undertake this volitionally. But if an outside group says, hey, we'll raise the money, and they cost about $15,000 a piece. But if the outside group raises the money and then brings it to the hospital EMT or whatever, then it's more likely to get done. And that's what the Safe Haven Baby Boxes helps people do, is to understand that process and how all this works and how to work together collectively to make them happen.
Yeah. Preserve life.
Absolutely, to preserve life.
And there are, I think, thousands of cases across this America where the lives have been saved because of this. Say with the baby boxes, more details, I'd encourage you to go look them up. Thank you for mentioning the organization. Because they provide a very safe place. So there's sensors in there that alert whether it's the fireman or policeman or hospital that there's a baby in the box. It's air conditioned, it's cooled to I think 72 degrees. It's a modern wonder to have. But
you know where they started?
Where's that?
South Korea.
Very
A
interesting.
pastor.
Wow.
They were having such a crisis there in that country. He said, I got to do something. So he put a little basket outside with a bell on it so that people could drop off their babies.
Right. And the bell would alert them.
Would alert them.
Right. Friends, have some lines available, 414-935-3030. That's 414-935-3030 or 800-733-8830. 800-733-8830. We're talking a number of legislative issues here in the state of Wisconsin. And if you have questions or comments on the things we've talked about, or perhaps something else percolating in your mind that you see going on that you'd like a response to on the legislative basis, public policy related issues, that's again 414-935-3030. There is another bill that's been introduced here. This is another constitutional amendment, or it's a constitutional amendment proposal, Assembly Joint Resolution number 36, to the right of the people to a clean, safe, and healthy natural environment and to its preservation. Now, on its face, that may sound pretty good, but my oh my, there's a lot of control coming here, Sam.
Right, and I think it leads into essentially the folks who are trying to introduce this. They're really aiming for a Green New Deal type of situation here. And so they think by amending the Constitution to say you have a right to a clean, safe, healthy, and natural environment, but that includes clean water, clean air, healthy soil, self-sustaining ecosystems. How that's carried out,
right, and that's
will be envisioned in a Green New Deal.
And that's
style
really
thing.
what's behind it. That, they say the devil's in the details for that in that regard. In that, who could be against having clean water and fresh water to drink and all these things? But all of a sudden, the next mandate, okay, therefore, there cannot be the sale of gasoline-powered vehicles any longer, and lawnmowers and so forth.
Correct, and I'll note too also in that Constitution there's a very specific line where it says the state is the essentially controlling interest in protecting our natural resources. And I think that's concerning because the state can be controlled by whoever, and if your land is a natural resource now, they can come and take it probably under that type of constitutional amendment. So I would be careful with that kind of language.
Well, in this phrase that these rights shall never be infringed, exactly what does that mean? By whom and how, and in order to what kind of laws are going to be passed to make sure, according to the point here, that these things are not infringed. The other place I know of where that language is used in our state constitution is in relationship to religious freedom, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they want to put that in the same power as religious freedom?
Well, it's starting to look like it.
Yeah, wow. Very interesting. Again, that's Assembly Joint Resolution 36, just introduced on May the 2nd. And so that is a fresh legislative material. Also introduced is Assembly Joint Resolution 38. Its Senate counterpart is Senate Joint Resolution 42. I read this and said, really? We're going to proclaim 2025 the year of the snake? It's crazy.
Well, I'm going to take a shot at this, okay? It's Lunar New Year for our Asians. I know we have a fairly significant Asian population in Wisconsin, but it is not dominant by any means. And so here we have this resolution, and I've never seen one before. Sam might have seen one because maybe he looked at some of those things a little more closely, but in all my years of doing this, I never saw anything like this. What I find interesting is what they said about the snake. For me as a believer, I do not associate snakes with anything good. I'm sure somebody is going to tell me that they eat all the things that I don't like or something, but I think of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. I don't extol the snake as, using some of the language that's used in this bill, that it's kind of like a good luck thing and a good omen and all the rest of that. Some of the language I think there is just, it's overblown. And so I don't know if they didn't have enough to do.
Yeah, and that's why I find it too, that, legislatively speaking, we got some bigger fish to fry.
Correct.
And it's not going to go anywhere. If I remember correctly, all of the authors and co-sponsors were
Democratic.
of the minority party. So.
We've got Peggy calling from Lake Geneva. Hi, Peggy, you're on the air.
Hello. Hi, Julaine. And I just wondered, the car bombing that just happened at the fertility clinic, I would like you to say what happens to, they said there were thousands of embryos, little baby embryos. I'd like you to say what happens to all of those that do not get implanted.
Yep, that's thank you for the call here tonight.
Sure.
And that's an issue that you were working
That's the issue
toward.
we were talking about, and thank you, Peggy. Look, those embryos are either frozen, actually, and stored for not forever, because at some point, if they've been stored too long, they destroy them, or they're adopted as snowflake babies. That's the adoption process we use for those little frozen embryos. But there's no way that we're going to adopt all of those that are frozen. Look, IVF creates, way more embryos than they actually implant. And that's the problem. They're creating new life that they probably will never use, and so they freeze them and then ultimately destroy them. So it's It's a systematic destruction of new human life.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's on, I don't think it's wrong to say it's on a massive scale. So, you know, President Trump has weighed in on this. We've talked about some of it here at the state level. Years ago, Jim, a doctor on our board told me, he said, Jelaine, if we don't require every embryo that is created through IVF to be implanted, we are going to have a major issue. We have a major issue.
Right, yeah. And so that issue is before us. Thank you for raising it here tonight. 414-935-3030 is our number, 414-935-3030. There is another proposed resolution here, Assembly Joint Resolution 33. It has the same counter in the Senate Joint Resolution 33. The Declaration of the Economic Justice Bill of Rights. Sam.
Well, I guess the easiest way, and just for clarification for folks back home, when we talk about resolutions, most of them are symbolic in nature. So they're meant to send a message about people's priorities or things that they think are important to them. Some of the resolutions that we talked about are constitutional amendments, but most of them are symbolic in nature. This one is symbolic of an intent to enforce some sort of socialism kind of style of government. When you read through the resolution and the things that they're describing, that every job must be paid a livable wage, and all these sorts of things, it essentially is smacking of the tones of socialism, and that's their intent of enforcing that type form of government through. And if you notice that the minority party is the ones that are all signed on to this, so I would say that that's their aim and their goal is to symbolically tell people this is the way we want to move our government.
But one thing I noticed, you count the number of people who have signed on to this, you've got 1/3 of the state assembly. There's like 31 signatures under the assembly, a number under the Senate as well. That's a pretty significant number.
Well, this is a shot across the bow. This is 2026 if they flip the state legislature. They're saying, and the enumerated points in that resolution, this is what we're going for. If we get the majority and we keep a governor in there that is shares our worldview, then we are going to start passing bills that will do this. It was like the TABO, remember Tabor, the Taxpayers Bill of Rights, and that actually became, a resolution that was going to have legs. It never got where they wanted it, but it was the same idea. And I think this is exactly what they're doing. They're saying, hey, we flipped the legislature, this is where we go.
Wow. Let me just mention this as well. This is just introduced today in the legislature. Assembly Bill 265. It's regarding human trafficking of a child, but increases the penalty for human trafficking. That is a huge issue going on. We don't have time to further discuss it. You can check it out. It's Assembly Bill 265. To be in contact with Wisconsin Family Council, check out their website, wifamilycouncil.org, wifamilycouncil.org. 1-888-378-7395. And Jelaine, good to have you here tonight.
Thank you. Good to be back.
And,
good to see everybody.
Sam, thank you for making the return visit as well. And Legislative Director with Wisconsin Family Action.
Thank you.
Great. Sam's doing a great job, by the way.
And friends, thank you for joining us all this season here for inFocus. We are going into summer recess, Lord willing, picking up just the week after Labor Day. And trust you'll be able to join us, even wonderful programming through the summer as well. Good night. May God bless you here from inFocus.